Okay, hello, good afternoon. My name is Hazel, and I'm going to be talking about Confucianism today for my final PowerPoint presentation, and a little bit about Buddhism and how they compare and contrast some of the similarities and differences, and an overall idea of both, the most important parts. So, okay, here we are. Okay, so Confucianism. In general, Confucianism is not too much thought of as a religion, in sense of it's more of a social system or what's considered to be both social and an ethical philosophy. So rather than a religion where you adhere to systems and rules, in a philosophy, it's more of a system of thought and values and ethics on a traditional standard between people. Foundations of Confucianism is essential to the development of it over time as well. In addition, the foundations include ideas that stem from ancient religions and other values in terms of Chinese society and what could be considered traditional. When we speak of Confucianism, there is not a common or main geographical location that represents Confucianism generally. Instead, there is a representation shown in that of things like family and state and society and even school. So, like I said before, it's less of a overall tradition that is ideally thought of to be typical and more so of values that you instill in your own life on many different levels. Next, to talk a little bit about Confucianism and its founder. It is said that a man named Master Kong, born sometime between 479 BCE to 551 BCE, and he did not knowingly create it, but instead he intended to start a new system of ideals, and then later it would become better known as Confucianism. But again, he did not intend for it. The overall goal of the founder was to instead take a different religion that was then considered to be obsolete because the values that it showed proved to be inconsistent with what was capable of keeping up over time. And instead, the goal was to remake it in the shape of its best components and leave out what the worst components were. So the founder was challenging the ideas of what a prominent social order consisted of, because at the time, there were different standards, and he believed that there was a better way. And at the time, again, policy was determined to be highly important. And as such, there was aggressive policies implemented to enforce the law. So it was more focused on the law in a lot of ways and less about treating others in an appropriate way all the time. In addition, there's an importance in understanding the Zhao religion. The Zhao dynasty was known as a Chinese folk religion, and with ancestral worship, that was an important part of the Zhao dynasty. There was also a big emphasis on heaven worship. So the government consisted of a monarchy. Generally, the Zhao dynasty adopted the concept that the mandate of heaven was one of the most important ideas. And the mandate of heaven was that the common belief that the Shanti ordered a ruler. And in that, this ruler, it could be an emperor or perhaps a dynasty or something similar to the both, was to rule so long as the rule was pleasing to him, the Shanti. Thus, this led an idea towards Confucianism, and it took the foundations of the Zhao dynasty, but then implemented different techniques within the framework of the Zhao dynasty, and thus created something new and something that worked better for more people and was able to make a foothold in different people's lives and be continued through time and continue, unlike that of the Zhao dynasty, which had major shortcomings and ceased to be practiced because of it. To touch a little more on the concepts of Confucianism, it deals largely with ideas around what is considered the normal behavior of an average person. There are people who are not average per se that exhibit eccentric behaviors, but that's not as widely focused on. We deal with the average person and how a typical person in their everyday life goes about their interactions. Confucianism accounts for different values and behaviors, typically in a primary social institution, but it's also not limited to human relationships, even on the most basic level. In addition, Confucianism offers ideals in the sense that individuals adapt to and accept social order, and in doing so, they participate in defined roles of society, and that leads to more complex personal obligation. The idea of this is that as relationships grow and become more complex, and we feel more, and our inner relations express our outer relations, there becomes a personal obligation to treat people correctly, even with so many different emotions. Perhaps it is the case that if Confucianism starts from the base of people, and that being even an individual or even a single family, then it can rework everything that proceeds from it up into larger masses of people and eventually large areas at a time. So, to talk a little bit about the most important elements of Confucianism. Confucianism makes a strong effort to stress the importance of correct social behavior, as well as the desire to avoid confrontation. While it is sometimes harder to remain neutral rather than disrespectful or displeased, Confucianism makes an additional attempt to heed one to avoid the desire of confrontation. It leads to worse confrontation from there. Thus, nothing positive can be gained. It is as if there was an original set of moral principles that concurred with well-performed actions in terms of what is normally and relatively accepted, and Confucianism drew on these original moral set of principles and derived ideas set around them. Within Confucianism, there is a state of propriety, and it is desired to attain what is known to be correct interactions when interacting with others. There are very important elements of Confucianism in that of what is called Li. That is the overall Confucian idea of social principles. This is one of the main themes of it. On the other end, there is also the element of Ren, and this is a general sense of humanness within interactions. So there is a human nature side, the cosmic side of where humans come from and what they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And then there's also a side of individual interactions with others and more of a social contract between society. Two different aspects of Confucianism. Both are equally important. So now to talk about Buddhism in general. It was founded by a man named Gautama Buddha, a religious leader and teacher who lived in India, 6th to 5th century BCE, 54. Gautama, he was accredited as the world founder of the religion of Buddhism. Also, in addition to Gautama, he was accredited for the rediscovery of the path to freedom from ignorance, craving, and the cycle of rebirth and suffering. One of the large principles in Buddhism is the idea and theme of nirvana, also known as the ultimate goal of Buddhism, thought to be the final state of enlightenment when a personal flame of desire is satisfied fully. I'll talk a lot more about Buddhism, but it's to be considered one of the more prominent and known religions, also practiced by an accredited few. To further talk about the concepts of Buddhism, one highly important concept is the Four Noble Truths. The first one identifies the presence of suffering. By identifies the presence of suffering, what I mean is one can understand that there is such a thing as suffering within their life, and they understand it to be a part of the cycle of their life and how it relates to them. The second of the Four Noble Truths seeks to determine the cause of suffering. After you understand the presence of suffering, one wonders where it comes from, why it's necessary, and why it relates to them within their life. The third of the Four Noble Truths is the truth of the end of suffering. After you can identify the presence and determine the cause, one wants to know how to end it, what one may do or can do in order to end the cycle of suffering. Upon that, you reach the fourth noble truth, and this includes the Noble Eightfold Path, or attaining the end of suffering. The Eightfold Path has a set of systems and guidances in its own, but it is set again with the common idea of attaining the end of suffering as the fourth noble truth. To speak more on Buddhism, another large and important concept is karma. Karma is generally thought to be about good or bad actions that a person commits in their life. Typically, a good action is connoted with good karma, and a bad action is connoted with bad karma. Some actions weigh more than others on a karmic scale, and there is also such a thing as neutral karma. An example of neutral karma would be eating or sleeping, because while these do not connote a good or bad presence, they are just simply something that we must do to survive. Therefore, there equals no difference in our comedic balance. To speak more on that, good or bad karma comes from doing an action in your life and why you do that. There's an idea around motivation for the action, how it serves you, how it serves others, what it costs you or costs them, the amount of time and effort. There are many things that account for the weight of a karmic action. To continue, another important concept of Buddhism is the cycle of rebirth. There is a large determinant being on the cycle of rebirth that includes karma. As spoken of previously, karma is a large determinant, and your karmic balance, in fact, the cycle of birth and how you are reborn. To talk about the different options of being reborn, I would like to talk about the 6 separate planes in which one can be born. 3 of them thought to be good, and 3 of them thought to be bad in a sense. The good ones include the planes of the demigods, the plane of the realm of the gods, and the plane includes the realm of the men. These are thought to be good because they can be joyous and joyful, and you can derive pleasure from it. In turn, we have 3 planes that connote bad ideas and bad feelings in the terms of the plane of animals, the plane of ghosts, and the planes of hell. Being born in either of these 3 would include suffering, and that is not favorable, of course. So, now that we've discovered what Confucianism is mainly, and Buddhism is mainly, I would like to go back now and take a deeper look at Confucianism again to give a better and overall well-rounded idea of what it consists of. So, to start, we can talk about the main principles of Confucianism, and they are spelled out over 9 ancient Chinese works. This includes 5 classics and the 4 books. Within these literary works, They are considered to be major schools of thought that include the idea surrounding the innate goodness of human nature, as well as character of a person in terms of directing emotions accordingly. So again, this is thought of by innate good human nature. That is the thought of Ren again. And it's also the thought of Li in the terms of directing emotions accordingly. Ren and Li play a crucial role in developing the entirety of a human life. And I thought it would be worth mentioning again while we look deeper into Confucianism, how Neo-Confucianism came to be. Neo-Confucianism is the intellectual activities of the Song Dynasty because it gave rise to a new system of Confucian thought, and this was based on a mixture of Buddhist and Taoist elements. So the new school of Confucianism will also come to be known as thus Neo-Confucianism. Now, I would like to take a deeper look at Buddhism to give you, again, a more well-rounded idea. To start, Buddhism is considered non-theistic and in such has no creator theory. There is not one God or one original place in which we all came from. Buddhism was initially one of the many schools of thought which developed in response to what was perceived as the failure of Orthodox Hinduism to address the needs of people. In that, the Buddha came to understand that desire and attachment caused suffering, and humans suffered because they were ignorant of the true nature of existence. To explain that, Buddha came to understand the desire of attachment. So in that he means humans and their desire for material things on earth, whether it be a job or family or friends or a feeling or material things. A desire for attachment, it caused suffering. And this suffering is what again plays such a large role in the cycle of our lives. Humans suffered because they were ignorant of the true nature of existence. And by that, he means that humans suffered because they were more worried about attachment and their material things than they were the true nature of their existence. And because they did not know the true nature of their existence, they could not focus on it. And thus they focused on incorrect ideas, such as their desires. While we take a deeper look at Buddhism, I thought it would also be worth mentioning something called the Wheel of Becoming. This is a facet of Buddhism, but I thought it was important. And in such, there is depicted as being held by a demon, a wheel that is held by a demon, and it represents impermanence, and with the 12 stages of dependent origination around the outside. More ideas to give you an idea of what Buddhism is. Now, I would like to talk about main differences between Confucianism and Buddhism. There are many more differences than likenesses specifically per se, but likenesses include overall more important themes, while differences are very specific objections between each. To start with, Buddhism calls for rituals including meditation. Meditation is the central idea of Buddhism and is considered crucial if you want to be successful in some of their values. Confucianism does not. It does not have an idea of meditation, and rather, Confucianism gives the option to visit a temple to pay homage or reflect on yourself. There is not a central homage to pay in terms of Confucianism, though. In addition, Buddhism originated in India, as Confucianism originated in China. Next, Buddhism as a religion specifically rejects the idea that there is one all-powerful God, as Confucianism, which claims to not be religion at all. Again, Confucianism thinks of itself as a system of moral philosophies and philosophical ideas on how a person is to act, and human nature in general. In addition, Buddhism has a common signal in terms of the Buddha statue, or also pictures as well, whereas Confucianism does not have this heart. To continue with main differences between Confucianism and Buddhism, I would like to say that with Buddhism, rebirth is a large central idea, and Confucianism does not account for this as well. Again, I talked a lot about rebirth earlier and how it is a main contributor in the Buddhist religion. Confucianism focuses more about the person now and then, where they are at the time. Buddhism thinks attaining nirvana is the only way to escape infinite suffering. Confucianism does not have an utmost aim. While Buddhism thinks there is one thing that will be at the end of a good human life, Confucianism does not have a one end. The Buddha is the main founder of Buddhism, and in contrast, Kong Qi is the founder of Confucianism. Buddhism includes that of the Sangha, composed of male monks and female nuns. It is supported by Buddhists. Confucianism is comprised of only bureaucrats. Next, in continuation of differences, I would like to say that Buddhism includes Buddhists that follow a set of Buddha teachings. Confucianisms include disciples of Confucius. Buddhism implies ignorance, as it is with all sentient things. Confucianism provides ideas supporting that of humans should respect superiors and one another. Buddhism thinks that life is essentially about suffering, and eventually one will escape in hopes of attaining nirvana, while Confucianism is focused on human nature and proper social interactions. Now, to change things a little bit, I would like to talk about the main similarities between Confucianism and Buddhism. And again, while differences lie in smaller, more specific ideas, similarities lie on overarching themes. Primarily, Buddhism aims ultimately to end human mental suffering. And in turn, Confucianism wants to ultimately inflict pure social harmony, which in turn should also end human suffering. This is a common notion between both. In addition, both Buddhism and Confucianism promote a strong sense of equality within their overarching themes. Next, Buddhism and Confucianism both contain multiple examples of sacred texts that provide followers context and ideas of how to achieve the main goals. Next, both Buddhism and Confucianism follow a dharmic idea, rejecting the other dharmas that are not about a doctrine, law, way, or teachings. So, now that we have discussed Confucianism and Buddhism at length and went into deep underlying ideas of both and how they compare and contrast to each other, we can now get into the review and conclusion of my presentation. I would like to start by saying, in general, Confucianism is not so much thought of as a religion, rather more so of what is considered to be both social and ethical philosophy. Again, the goal of the founder was to instead take a different religion that was then considered obsolete and remake it in the shape of its best components and leave out that of the worst components. Confucianism took foundations of the Zhao dynasty, but then implemented his own techniques within the framework of the Zhao dynasty and thus created something new. Major schools of thought include ideas surrounding the innate goodness of human nature as well as character of a person in terms of directing emotions accordingly. Again, this is to give you a review and an overall idea of Confucianism. And again, for Buddhism, I'd like to remind you of Gautama Buddha, a religious leader and teacher who lived in India. He was accredited as a world founder of the Buddha religion. This included ideals of karma again, generally thought to be about good or bad actions a person commits in their life. Again, the cycle of rebirth, a large determinant of the rebirth cycle, included karma. And then Buddha came to understand that desire and attachment caused suffering, and humans suffered because they were ignorant of the true nature of their existence. Thus, we have come to our overall conclusion. When examining Buddhism and Confucianism, it is easy to see all the wonderful different aspects of each. I have tried to be specific and direct when explaining what property lies to each and how it is important in developing the overall foundation of structure of each idea, one being religion, one being a system of moral, philosophical, and philosophical ideas. Next, while both are prominent ideas followed heavily today by many, they have large differences as well as large overlapping themes. While they do not care for exactly the same things, they both have respect for many of the same things, and their differences allow them to each be their own in their way. Next, one focuses more on human suffering in this lifetime, while the other focuses more on how humans should interact within their lifetime in accordance with a just society. I think that while both have sacred text, they teach different ideology within their pages. Both have many years of existence that prove they are followed, and that in the followings, people find value because they derive what they want to out of them. They get closer to an overall happiness by following the teachings of these ideas presented in both Buddhism and Confucianism. Lastly, what I would like to say, wrapping up my PowerPoint presentation on Confucian and Buddhism today, is that when both of these ideas are taken, Buddhism and Confucianism, and they are compared, I think that it is easy to see if these steps are followed and people adhere to the advice and the teachings that they give. I think it would be easy to see how each of them can better a person's life in numerous ways. Thus, that concludes my PowerPoint presentation on Confucianism, mainly with the addition of Buddhism, how they compare and contrast, and the similarities and the overall ideas of both. I appreciate y'all a lot for listening. Thank you. Here are my citations, just as I give credit to all of the wonderful sites that helped me bring together my PowerPoint for you today.